Welcome to Boswell's virtual event series. It is day 4,360. I'm Daniel Goldin, the proprietor. I just want to mention tonight we're on Zoom webinar, which means you don't have a camera or microphone, but you do have a chat box. So you can send us questions through chat or through the Q&A function. I will note that the chats go to me, but if you say something great, like how much you love the book, I will send it out to everybody. And speaking of great, here is the great Jenny Chou, one of the Boswell booksellers, who is going to introduce tonight's event. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome. I'm thrilled that Boswell Books gets to host Margarita Montimore because I have been excited to talk about Oona Out of Order since I first read it as an ARC in January 2020. And believe me, I have been trying to get everyone else to read it ever since then. And I knew as soon as I read it that it would be one of my top 5 books of 2020, and it definitely was. Since our event is in paperback, which has been out for a month, this will be a little bit spoiler friendly. We'll talk about some spoilers at the end. But we'll try not to give too much away for those of you who haven't read the book or are still in the middle. That said, I do want to start by mentioning the last line, which you're not allowed to page forward and read right now if you haven't finished it. But it's epic and memorable, and it's just the perfect ending to this delightful book. So a short intro. Margarita lives in New Jersey with her husband and dog, but she was born in Soviet Ukraine and grew up in Brooklyn. She worked in publishing for social media before following her dream of writing full-time. Seems that was a good idea for her to follow that dream, because Oona Out of Order became a USA Today bestseller and a Good Morning America book club pick. So my first question, in Oona Out of Order, your twist on the time travel genre is so wonderfully creative, and you do a great job of making readers see the big complexities, particularly in Oona's relationship with her mom, but also in small things like in how in 1991, she mentions Uber and Instagram, and to Crosby, who's obviously confused. Tell us how you came up with the idea about writing about a woman who jumps back and forth about the timeline of her life. And then maybe you could read a little bit for us after you answer that question.
Sure, no problem. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Boswell's has been so kind to Oona, so I'm thrilled to be doing this event with all of you. In terms of how the book came about, I never in a million years thought I would write a time travel story because I love them, but they seem like so complicated and involving so much organization and thought, and just I just didn't think I had that kind of brain for it, that I was just way too chaotic to put together a story like that. But I did find myself always wondering, like, what would my ideal time travel story look like in terms of, you know, like what decades or eras would I want the character to revisit, and, you know, what kind of themes would I want to explore? So in the back of my head, it's almost like I was starting to piece together this like Goldilocks vision of what that time travel story would be that doesn't exist yet. And then a few years ago, you know, I was in my late 30s and found that, unlike turning 30, which was fantastic and really just, I felt like I came into my own, facing 40 was a little bit more of a struggle for me. And I was having these moments of disconnect, like, oh my gosh, has it really been 20 years since this album that I listened to in college came out, or high school? And, you know, how is it possible that, you know, I still feel like I'm 19 on the inside sometimes. And then, you know, other times you wake up and you feel like you're 100. And so it got me thinking about, you know, what does it mean to act your age and to be your age? And what are the things that are expected of us? Like, what is going to be expected of me now that I am about to be 40? What is a 40-year-old like? And what have I accomplished or not accomplished that I should have by 40? And so I took all of that existential despair and decided, you know what, I'm just going to have fun revisiting the certain time periods and just write this story because I got to thinking, what if there was a woman who experienced the same thing because she actually was leaping in her adult body from year to year and every year at midnight. So it would be like, it satisfied my kind of need to spend a little bit more time. Like I love the show Quantum Leap, and where, you know, but he always would just leap into one person for one episode and then in one era, and then he'd leap somewhere else. And so I always felt like I wish that there'd be a little more time spent in each era. But when it's a story where it's entirely spent in one year, like Back to the Future is all in the 50s, it's like, I want to mix it up a little bit. Like, so, you know, this, with the leaping, I got to kind of visit the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, the 2010s, and explore Oona's life, you know, in her teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. So yeah, so it was a lot of fun for me to kind of take all of the, you know, kind of bigger existential thoughts I had and then sort of put them through the lens of time travel to have a little bit more fun as I was kind of therapeutically dealing with my own kind of passing years.
And it was fun for us as readers to never know where we were going to end up next with Oona.
Sometimes I didn't either, to be totally honest.
So what are you going to read for us?
I think I'm just going to start with the prologue, just to
that sounds great.
People a little bit of a taste. Oona stopped trusting the mirror years ago. After all, it told only a sliver of the story. This isn't me. I am not this woman. The mirror exposed time's passage, yes, but eclipsed her heart's true mileage. The lined face, the extra pounds, the hair chemically treated to hide its gray. Each year the body was hers, but her mind was out of sync with her reflection, always playing catch up, trying to rearrange the scrambled pieces of her life. It was nobody's fault she had met her future too soon. It should have been decades before she wore this funeral dress. Oona threaded the chain of her necklace through her fingers, sunlight glinting off the gold gears of the pendant's clockwork parts. At first, the lost years were agony, the instant loss unbearable. And when the stolen time was returned to her, it was rearranged. Always something else taken from her, someone else. But life had a system of checks and balances, and the bad breaks were tempered with good fortune. Even on this bleak day, hidden delights waited to offset the sorrow. She just had to be patient, open. For Oona, the pendulum could swing either way. Next year, the face in the glass could be older or younger. It was the closest thing she could imagine to immortality, a game of existential roulette, even though the wheel would eventually stop spinning. I'll see them all again, eventually, and lose them all. Again. She tried to accept the mirror's current verdict, to look at herself here and now, to be here now. But today, when her loss was tremendous and threatened to engulf her, she allowed herself to step out of this moment and rewind to a brighter one. Her muted dress replaced with sequins, her bedroom swapped for a mirrored basement, a room brimming with music and color and light, a love like a supernova, a party like no other. I can still get it right. Someday she would pick up the thread and return to the party. Not a do-over, only a disrupted continuation. No telling when. Someday. Are you ready?
Well, we are ready. What a structural masterpiece, really. I mean, it's just so well put together. My first question, of course, is what order how did you write it?
And that's actually one of my questions too. Did you write Oona Out of Order in order or out of order?
I can't imagine, like, when people wonder, did you write it kind of chronologically and then just cut it up and mix it around? And I wrote it in the order that the reader gets to read it. You know, I did have leaps that I ended up cutting out. The last third of the book was rewritten and very, very heavily revised, but it really was, other than just having a very loose set of notes and ideas, like, you know, what are scenarios I want to see her in, or places, or, you know, little things, many of which I deviated from. And this is why I can't outline something in detail, because the characters in the story, they take over and they do whatever they want anyway. But yeah, it would be, you know, I'd get to the end of one leap, and, you know, sometimes I'd be kind of set of like, okay, well, from here, we definitely have to go there. But sometimes I'd be like, okay, where should we go now? What year should Oona end up in next? And, you know, how can we shake things up a little bit more? And then I found that kind of once I had it all written, that's when I kind of started putting it in order more, of just taking a look to see, okay, what does this need? What does, you know, what needs to be rearranged? What needs to be fleshed out? And yeah, time travel and revision are not the best of friends. Definitely, it's like a domino. If you knock over one, you may knock over all of them. So you have to make sure kind of to pull at each thread very carefully. And so it was a challenge, but it was also a lot of fun.
You almost needed a continuity reader, like somebody who's like in charge. Was that you, or did some people help you?
It was, well, it was me. Like I had two timelines. I had a chronological timeline, which is very, very loose notes that kind of let me see everything at a glance. And then Oona's personal timeline that let me see her leaps at a glance. And just juxtaposing those two helped. But then my husband, Terry, he is Mr. Continuity. I mean, he is the kind of person that we'll be watching something and he'll be like, oh, she was just holding a banana, now she's holding an apple. Where he once was like, rewind that, I think there's a spider on that lamp. Like, who notices these things? But he does. And so I knew that if anybody, and especially whenever we watch time travel movies or anything like that, we always get into these long arguments afterwards where he's like drawing stick figures and arrows and shouting, it's a loop, it's a loop. And I'm like, it's parallel timelines, it's an alternate world. And so if I was able to write a story that would satisfy Terry's nitpickiness, I knew I'd be okay. And so when he read it, I think there was like one little thing that for him, it was a little nitpick. For me, I was able to explain it. So, you know, I was okay with it, but yeah, he didn't find any major plot holes. So that felt like one of the biggest reliefs of my life.
And before I pass to Jenny again, I did want to say also, what about all the little details? I mean, one of my favorite moments is, I don't want to give anything away for the reader who hasn't read it, except the end I can, but that moment where she says, oh yeah, that's not a thing yet. And did you have to have like a invention timeline or something? Like
kind of.
I mean, timeline, yeah.
A little bit. Well, I didn't. Luckily, Oona is a little older than me, so luckily we've lived through many of the same years. So for me personally, like kind of thinking back on, you know, I was a teenager in the 90s, Oona's in her 20s in the 90s, but even just thinking like I didn't have a cell phone, and, you know, and even when they first came out, I didn't, you know, I thought like, oh, computers, cell phones, I don't need that kind of thing. I like paper books and typewriters. And, you know, it took me a while I'm like the opposite of an early adopter. I'm a late adopter. But just kind of thinking like that progression of technology, it was sort of, I was able to look back, you know, other than just researching specific years, it was almost like kind of looking at my own life and thinking like, my goodness, like I feel like I went from the dark ages to the Jetsons, just in like from the Flintstones to the Jetsons in my own lifetime. So that was fun to explore. Like, my goodness, if I had to kind of zoom around in my timeline, it would get confusing. And I would be saying like, yeah, let's call an Uber. Like, no, it's the 80s. We don't have those yet. You know, there are no apps.
Well, that was a scene that made me laugh when she just said, let's call an Uber, or people look like they're covered in Instagram filters. Like, and everybody's so confused. It's Instagram. So my question is something I've been wondering about since I first read the book in January 2020. And you chose a certain number of years of leaps that you were going to write about for Oona. if you could have written more years, and maybe you did, which year do you think you would explore? And for everyone watching, do you have a year that you wish Margarita had explored? And type it into the chat and I'll read them at the end.
Oh, well, I have always felt like I was born 10 years too late. And even though I came of age in the 90s, I am very much a fan of 80s and especially like new wave, post-punk, goth, like that whole era. So I wrote this book kind of initially with the idea that, okay, I'm going to make Oona older so that she could have some real like fun in the 80s and adventures. And then as the book kind of came to be, I had to actually replace one of the leaps that I had that was set in the 80s with one that I wrote that was 90s, just because that's what suited the story. And I loved the leap, but all of my readers just felt like it felt disjointed. And it felt more like it wasn't serving the story. So even though I have a lot of fun, and you know, it was just kind of, I had to serve the book, and I had to go like with what the plot needed, with what the characters needed. So I would say, yes, I wish I was able to explore the 80s more. I've started jotting down I've actually mapped out like 5 or 6 potential leaps, not including the one that I cut entirely from earlier versions of the book for like a continuation. And it would absolutely, it is going to have a lot more that takes place in the 80s. And I purposefully kind of hinted at little Easter eggs, you know, on the chance that I do continue the story. And, you know, things
excellent.
like, you know, I'll just say music related things, since we're not up to the spoilers yet. So, and then somebody alludes to her having European 80s adventures and things like that. So that's sort of, you know, when I think about, okay, if I kind of pick up this story down the line, you know, what do I want to do with it? And one of the things I'm always the most excited about is, okay, we're not just going to get to revisit the 80s, but I'm going to get to do research on cool cities in Europe in the 80s. So yeah, my like inner 80s nerd is excited at the very
Well,
top.
I love that you say that, because when I had to think about which one more chapter would I want to read, it was definitely the Europe in the 80s chapter. And I won't say what she's doing in Europe in the 80s because that would be a spoiler. So read the book, everyone. Now, Pat, what's your question, Daniel?
Oh, no, I just want to continue that. How many years did you cut out when you had to cut the book?
It wasn't cutting, well, it was more kind of swapping. So the leap in the 80s ended up, I ended up swapping it for one in the 90s. And then there were some that just I had to either trim down or just expand on a little bit. I had a little bit too much fun in the 90s, just like Oona did. So that the leap where she's a club kid, because it was just so, and people either love or hate that chapter. And I understand the drug use and the rampant sex and craziness. It's a lot. But for me, it was just like, it was such a circus. And I was in high school. I was a little too young for that scene.
Oh, no, nobody carded in New York.
What's that? Oh, I carded in New York. Not in the, I end at the Limelight, but I was there for like goth shows. I saw London After Midnight and Killing Joke there. I didn't see like Michael Alec and all the insanity and the drug use. Oh my goodness, insane. So for me, I was kind of like living vicariously through that whole carnival. And I knew I had to like rein in, like, okay, like we need to just put in just enough and like, let's not go too crazy because we still have like the rest of the story to tell here.
I just want to say, and I'm not, but you could go out a lot in New York to clubs and you could avoid the drugs if you were.
Oh yeah. Oh, believe me, I was kind of like I was a little bit of a goody two shoes. I was more into the music and the outfits. Not that I didn't, you know, at all, but yeah, I was. And also,
this is being recorded. But
I know. I'm not trying to run for president. I wasn't born in this country anyways.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the club stuff just because I grew up in New York and I lived went back home a lot in college, and then I lived in New York till about 86. And so of the clubs, there were like 5 clubs. So I went to Limelight Weekly, the Tunnel only once, and I used to go to Pyramid a lot too.
Pyramid,
so,
I went to so much. Yes.
I have, and it's one of those, how you have these, like, when you talk about like time shifting and you just know, I was just saying this to one of my friends with a reference to another book that we had both done the interview for an author. And I remembered like this moment where he's like grabbing me to pull me on the floor when a song, and like we heard the song, and he said, music is the true Proust Madeleine. It's not and I can still recall dancing to Shout by Tears for Fears. I'm thinking, there's no other club that I go to that would play this to dance to. So,
that's so funny.
It was fun. Was I your research internet or memory, or did you actually interview people for some of this stuff?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was memory. Did I interview people? I'm trying to think. I might have talked to like some of my friends who like from back in the day, but no, mostly I did watch some documentaries and like reread some books, like Party Monster and Disco Bloodbath and things like that. So a lot of it also was just going through photographs, because if I go through my old photos, it's just like me and my friends and our wacky outfits. But I really like the meatpacking district. I remember it being scary, and what was the club, their Mother, that I went to a few times, and like I remember we'd be like intimidated, but then I remember going to the meatpacking district when it was like designer stores and a boutique hotel, and then like just seeing the evolution of it. But getting that kind of visceral feel, I looked at a lot of photos of the city just to kind of help refresh my memory and just fill in those gaps wherever I could, to make sure that because I also like I went to school in Boston and then I lived abroad for a little while, so I got to see the city evolve. And I thought like this would be a fun way, because I know for me, I would sometimes leave for a year and it's like, oh my gosh, what happened to this place? And how is, it's like every time you see a different version of the city, but then imagine leaving or, seeing it decades apart, or, just in such a different sporadic time period. And I thought that would be a fun way to explore not just how her life changes, but also how New York does.
Yeah, the book is so much a love letter to New York. So it's one of the lovely things about it for me.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just want to mention some of those neighborhoods like meatpacking. It's like you go from, in your memory, of course, everything, we're all time traveling because our memories are the time travel. And I think about like walking, I would never walk past Avenue A alone because I'm a bit of a delicate flower. And I remember thinking, one year I won't walk on this street, and the next year I can't afford anything on this street. How did this happen so quickly?
Actually, it's funny. I remember in high school, my high school best friend Dave and I, we'd go shopping for used CDs and tapes and records in the East and West Village. And we had this rule, like we never went past Avenue A. But then this one time we saw a couple of actors from, I don't know if anybody remembers the sketch comedy show, The State. Everybody who was
Michael Ian Black and stuff? Yeah.
Yes. We saw Michael Ian Black and Kevin Allison walking toward like down 8th Street or something. And so we followed them because, we're not creepers. But they kept going past Avenue A, and we're like, oh my God, the state is going to get us killed, but we got to know where they're going. And and I remember, and they had a sketch on that had recently aired that was called "The Jew, the Italian, and the Redhead Gay All Live Together on Avenue A." And so when they were on Avenue A, we were just dying, but then scared that we were going to get mugged. But it was, we're 15, 16, so it was quite an adventure.
All my friends got mugged on 14th Street, West 14th. I don't know why, but that was just like, so. All right, Jenny, back to you. Where did you get mugged?
Okay, I'm going to knock on wood. I have never been mugged.
Wow.
Yeah. And let's see. I think we should talk about music. And I need to rework this question a little bit because I don't want to give anything away. But music is obviously important to Oona, and it's obviously important to you. I mean, let's just talk about the first chapter. She's debating whether she is going to stay with her band or go off and study in Europe. And I don't think that's too much to give away. But music also has a fixed time when it was written, but it's also timeless. And the way a few strums of a guitar or a few opening notes, and we're all right back to college. We all know that college song. So tell us about the importance of music in your life and how you incorporated it so well into Oona's life.
Sure, thank you. And I haven't been keeping up with all the questions, but I also see a related question that somebody asked if there's a playlist, and there is. I did put together a Spotify playlist that I am not ashamed to say I spent way too much time on, but it is on my website, montimore.com, like on the Oona page, there's a link to it. So there is a soundtrack that I had a lot of fun putting together. And for me, I did grow up with music sort of being an essential part of the household. My parents were both musicians, and I mean, we immigrated from Soviet Ukraine, but my mother was a conductor, a pianist, a singer. My father was an opera singer. And when in our early days in America, they still continued playing music, performing at like community centers and charity events. And I sang Tomorrow from Annie in a pink and purple sweater dress that my mom knit for me. And there's VHS footage of that somewhere from when I was like 9 years old. So it was just, they were always rehearsing or playing music. And then once I got a little bit, once I hit 9 is when I started listening to my own, developing my own tastes. And it was such a big part of my identity and who I was. And especially like as a teenager, once I kind of found the music that, expresses the things that just is so kind of deep in you, and all of the dark things and the turmoil of the teenage years, especially high school and college, like those years, I would say like music was as essential to me as oxygen. I always had, whether it was, first it was a Walkman, then a Discman, then it was an iPod, and it was like the soundtrack to my life. And I went to high school on the Upper East Side, and I lived in like South Brooklyn. And sometimes I would just like walk all the way downtown to the East Village. So I had this perpetual soundtrack just playing nonstop. And then, in college, I was, going out to clubs, and also like, I love cities where I can walk around a lot. So as I was writing the book, it informed kind of whenever I set a scene, especially with this book, I think about, not just, okay, what does it look like? What's the scenery? Where's everybody standing or sitting? I think about like, is there music playing? Or if this was a movie, what would be the song that's on the soundtrack kind of overlaying what's happening? And with this one, especially since Oona starts out when she's 18 years old, and that, I would say, like, that was the crux of when I was the most fully immersed. Like, the friends that I made were friends that went to the same clubs, or we liked the same bands, or, like that music was our connective tissue. So for Oona, I found that was something that it was essential to her personality and her character, but also something that could be a constant for her. Because like you said, that, it's rooted in a specific time, but at the same time, there is a timeless quality about music, and there's something about it that's eternal. So, wherever she is in time, she won't get completely lost, because she'll always have, her personal soundtrack to guide her and to sort of kind of help root her in wherever she is.
I was just thinking that it helps root her in her wherever she is in time.
Mm-hmm.
the music. Yeah.
Of course, sometimes she's singing some song from the future and everyone's going, that's pretty catchy.
Yeah.
I do love, especially, the Kate Bush, someone mentioned Kate Bush and Lou Reed. Yeah, I really like the Kate Bush chapters. I assume you like Kate Bush. So.
I love Kate Bush, and that was, it was like that I listened to, especially, I don't usually listen to music as much when I'm revising, usually when I'm drafting, because revising is more kind of mechanical, but I listen to so much Kate Bush and Brian Ferry, weirdly enough. But like, yeah, revising it, because for me, like, and especially like the Hounds of Love, the second half of that album, the whole like concept album,
right.
The notion of, that it's about a girl that's lost at sea, and Oona is kind of existentially lost at sea, and it fits so beautifully, and there's kind of such a longing in the way that Kate Bush sings, and kind of there is a timelessness, but also like this nostalgia and this like sweeping romanticism. So like there was so much in her voice and her songs that conveyed like just these huge emotions that I was like, well, if I can get like a tenth of this on the page, then I'll feel okay. So it was very inspiring.
The first Kate Bush song that I kind of knew was Wuthering Heights, and it's a song that sounds both futuristic and old-timey kind of at the same time. Why she does that. Do you I'm sorry, you got me thinking about my friend in New York that I would go to music store, like the new music came in on like Fridays, I think, and so like a whole bunch of us would meet up after work and walk from one store to another in the village.
Oh, nice.
Try to find import singles.
Yeah.
I want to know what your book, whether you were thinking about memory when you wrote the book. Like because like I said, memory is time travel in a way. And I feel like memory plays such an important part in the book. Were you doing that? Were you thinking about that consciously, or were you, did that just kind of come there?
Yeah, it was, it's more, I'd say, the notion of nostalgia, because I'm a really nostalgic person. And there's a line in the book that kind of, it felt like it came from Oona, but it was like a little dig at me. Like when I wrote it, I was like, ooh, when she's talking about like, is that what it means to get older? Like you just relive you become nostalgic and relive the best times of your life because all the best days are behind you. And for me, that was a like little reality check of, it's nice to revisit those times, but like let's not just say, oh, that was the good old days are the best days, and so any days that are forward are going to be the not as good days. And it was a really kind of, for me, like a wake-up call to how indulge the nostalgia sometimes, and balance that with also like looking forward to things in the future, or trying to plan for future, but more than anything, really try to be present and to be in the moment, because that, I didn't set out to kind of write a book about that. It was more like Oona discovered it, and I discovered as the story went along that like, oh wow, okay, we need to be present, and just kind of find that right balance of realizing that really the only thing that you have control over and the only thing you can influence is this moment right now and where we are today. So I can't say I'm I've taken it to heart always, but it's definitely a reminder that especially during the last year has helped me a lot.
Well, this is a message that seems to be, Jenny and I were talking about how interesting it is that books about time travel are often about living in the moment and mindfulness, because I'm sure you've heard about that book, The Midnight Library, which is
love The Midnight Library.
Well,
and
everybody who's buying
conversation, he's lovely.
Isn't he?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes,
we got to talk to him too. And if everybody who buys The Midnight Library will then go buy Oona Out of Order, afterwards, you'll definitely be, because I think we're getting to the point with that book where people are going to be doing what to read after that, and you'll definitely be on every table.
I saw it on
For sure.
Goodreads. It's like on one of the top Goodreads reviews, and I was like, that is like, it's such an honor to even be mentioned in the same sentence as that.
Have you read any of his other books? Definitely go back and read the last one.
I want to read what was it? How to Stop Time.
It's terrific.
The funny thing is that Oona, when it was pitched kind of, people were told like, it will appeal to fans of books like Matt Haig's How to Stop Time. So it was used as a comp title for Oona Out of Order. And then when the Midnight Library came out, I saw Oona used as a comp for that book. So it was just an interesting.
You're paying it forward.
Love it. I love it.
Jenny, what's your next question?
Well, in sort of in the vein of the Midnight Library, did you ever explore the idea of, or play with the idea a little bit while you were writing, of having Oona meet someone who's like her, who jumps around in time? Because that was one of my favorite scenes in the Midnight Library, is when the character does meet someone who's like her.
That is in my notes for the sequel with a bunch of question marks around it.
Daniel's so happy.
And it's funny because when I got to that moment in the Midnight Library, I was like, damn it! Oh, does that mean I can't do it now?
No,
and
not at all.
He did it.
Do it your own way.
He did it in How to Stop Time too.
Okay.
Actually, the difference between the two books is in How to Stop Time. That's in Midnight Library. She just meets the other person, but not really. It doesn't really drive the plot that much. In How to Stop Time, that's part of the plot.
Right.
So.
I've actually even considered, and I'm not going to make any promises or give any spoilers, but there's a possibility that somebody that she's already crossed paths with in the first book has some form, either has or had some form of the time illness. So it might be when they intersect again that'll come up. So it's definitely been on my mind. I had this meeting online with a book club where this incredible woman read this list of like, if there's a second book, here's some here's some things I'd love to see. I'd love for her to meet Sin again. I'm like, yep, I got that on my list. Like I was taking notes as she was giving me these pages. It was amazing. So I love having like impromptu brainstorming sessions.
I'm Jenny. I'm sure Jenny can help you with that too. So I was curious, several men in Oona's life. Do you have an adjective to describe the each of them? Edward, Peter, and Dale?
A single adjective. Ooh. Dale, the first word that comes to mind would be mercurial. He's very passionate, but I think sometimes maybe a little bit too much. Edward, depends on when you meet him. Yeah.
Well, that's something we want to talk about later.
Yeah. That is a Edward adjective. British, is that just too boring?
British, so loud. Sure, we'll take it.
Because from my personal experience, it covers a huge array of
adjectives,
of qualities. Yes, especially in the romantic arena. And then Peter, I would say it's so hard to name just like the one, and I know I'm like going to wake up at 3 a.m. and sit up and like shout the one word, but I'm thinking of something like quietly deep. And I feel like I don't have that whole, like that proverb, still waters run deep, like whatever the single word that encompasses that proverb is, to me, that's Peter. There is like a stillness, but all of these like hidden intriguing layers to him that perhaps in the future Universe outing, I'll delve into a little more.
Somebody asked if you would talk about the television series at all.
Oh, it's been just one of the greatest joys of my life to be involved in any capacity. Just that I've gotten to consult on it has been just such a thrill. Everybody I've worked with, like the development executives, it's been so fun. It's weird. It's like this, you go through phases of like, it's quiet, crickets, crickets, crickets. And then the email comes in of like, let's set up a call to talk. And then everything gets like really exciting and there's conversations and there's like a flurry of activity. And for me, it was really fantastic because I'm a major movie turned TV nerd, because like movies used to be really amazing and then TV and shows became really incredible. So so I switched my nerdiness into television, and writing Oona, the hope was like, oh, like a series, even a limited series, like would be so incredible. And I don't know how they would do it because there's so many different ways they could. But when we started having conversations, just being asked for my input and being able to like, you know, put together lists of screenwriters that I love, or, you know, ideas and things like that was amazing. And then Alice Bell, the screenwriter who has signed on, I got to have a Zoom with her, and just everybody go to Hulu and watch The Beautiful Lie. She adapted Anna Karenina in like present day Sydney. It's so fantastic. Like I thought, oh, another Anna Karenina? I was completely riveted. I like blew through the whole thing in a single weekend. So just seeing how she was able to adapt such a familiar classic work into such a fresh story and bring new life to it. I can't wait to see, like I've already seen some things that she's outlined, and it's blown me away. I love that she's taking it and running with it, changing some things, experimenting with it. Like I want it to be, you know, its own world. So yeah, so it's just been amazing, and I feel tremendously lucky. So right now we're kind of more in a quiet lull period, and you know, hopefully things will kind of get buzzy and exciting again. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I know kind of not all authors get to be involved, and so for me, I feel so lucky that I've been part of it.
I think it seems to me that from what I've heard, authors seem to be more likely to be involved in streaming than they were in movies. Like in movies, right? It seems pretty hands-off. Mm-hmm. You know, having seen, you know, they're lucky if they're allowed to come on set, but for some reason it's not, it seems to be a little more acceptable. Maybe because they're so open and there's so much that can happen, you know, they're like, we just want input from anybody, you know, sort of like, just because it's so much.
I think that could be a reason though, that, you know, even as a consultant, because I don't think authors should adapt or solely adapt their work. I think getting the fresh creative voice in is essential and is like what will help take it to the next level. But yeah, if you look at something like The Handmaid's Tale, which for, you know, I can't think of a better adaptation of anything ever. And of course, I mean the Hulu show, but you know, Margaret Atwood consults on that. It's written by a whole other team. They took her brilliant book and turned it into a show, like expanded on it in this incredible way. So I think, yeah, having the author's input, some of the best work is coming out of the streaming services. So, you know, having Oona attached to Amazon, like really, it really was like top of my list, like pinch me. I can't believe like this is happening. And, you know, just, I think also because when we're writing this book, like I have characters and scenes and leaps and notes that didn't make it into this book that, you know, might make it into another book, or, you know, just because they're in my outtakes, maybe they would work better in an episode of a show. So I think it's also, you know, it's another possible resource to have the writer involved. But then there are others that they just want to write the book, hand it over, and then go and write their next book. And, you know, for me, I I'm excited by every step of it, and you know, everything kind of that has to do with the entertainment industry is so fascinating to me. So, you know, whenever I get the chance to have a little peek, I love it.
Jenny, do you have another question? Because otherwise I'll ask about my British one. Can I ask my British one?
You asked
So
your
I
British
know
one.
I know your book was called The Rearranged Life of Oona Lockhart in Great Britain.
Yes.
And you can show it. Yep, there it is.
Cover.
I'm not a fan, you know, it used to be so common to change titles. And in the age of the internet, I'm not as crazy about that. But so I'm curious, which came first, which title came first? And the other thing is, because I do know, where did this come up with Chris Cleave, and you know, it's Little B in the United States and The Other Hand in Great Britain, and the books are slightly different. The editors didn't come, the editor, you know, it's, and not just they spelled color differently.
Wow.
But they actually have a theme that's different because the editors couldn't agree on it.
Wow.
I never knew
So
that.
tell
That's
me.
interesting.
What came first, and any changes? Obviously not, because you wouldn't have said wow.
No, yeah, so honestly not, but the Oona Out of Order came first. Like, its titles either come to me kind of really quickly and like, you know, an angel from heaven, or I'm tortured and tormented, and you know, they take much longer to decide on. And Oona Out of Order was one of those that just like fell out of the sky into my lap. And but I also know that publishers, you know, one of the first things you hear as an author is don't get attached to your title. And if you're lucky enough to get a book deal, they might change it. And that's, you have to trust that marketing people and publicity people, like, that's their expertise. Sometimes a cover or title will change because a chain wants to, you know, they are kind of, you know, having a say in what the book is for their audience, for their customers. So, you know, I went into it knowing that, okay, if I get to keep my title, hooray. If not, that's how it goes. So I was very happy that Flatiron Books wanted to keep it. And then when Gallant, the UK publisher, decided to change the title, I wasn't surprised. So, you know, I thought it was nice of them to consult me on, for them, they wanted to position it alongside books that also had that kind of the blank life of blank, like, what is it, the 7.5 Lives of Henry August.
Evelyn Hugo.
Yeah, and in fact, a book came out, was it The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird? Came out like within a week or two of the UK edition, and there were reviews that kind of mentioned both, and both of them had the pink covers. So and this book, the book that it was kind of compared alongside, was by a best-selling author, and it was like a highly anticipated next novel of hers. So it did work in my favor in that case. On the other hand, I know that like some US readers or some readers got confused thinking that it was 2 different books. So, and in fact, like, I know somebody that ended up buying the UK edition thinking that it was another book, and I was like, I'm sorry. She's like, it's okay, I'll give it to a friend, like it's totally fine. So you know, for me, I think that the cover, I love the cover design of this one. I think I love both of them. That was the other thing too, like, I knew when this was all happening, like, if you get consulted on the cover at all, then, you know, say thank you. Like, sometimes that you're just given a cover and that you have to accept it. So, you know, being able to have some input on like the cover and the titles, because I gave them rearranged. They were like, the something life of Oona Lockhart, and I, like, you know, suggested a whole bunch of adjectives they liked rearranged. I was like, all right, let's do it. So yeah, I think, you know, there's just a certain amount, you have to understand the things that you have control over and don't have control over. And fortunately, as far as the story goes, the UK editor, she had a lot of editorial notes. I got my notes from my US and UK editor at the same time, and to like some great, wonderful miracle, they complemented each other, and just both editors had such helpful ways for me to like improve the book and revise the book that, you know, just did not contradict, surprisingly. So, you know, I was very, very lucky that, you know, it all kind of like fell into place, and the areas where it was a little different, you know, I just trust, I'm not the expert on the UK and Commonwealth book market, so I will I'll leave it in their capable hands.
What's your next question, Jenny?
Well, I was just thinking we just have about 10 minutes left, and maybe I was scrolling through here looking to see what scenes or years or leaps people were interested in reading about.
I think it's pretty, I think we've covered most of them. Another person asked for a sequel. Seems like it's a possibility.
I have the title. I have like 3/4 of it loosely outlined, which means if and when I sit down to write it, it's gonna go like off in its own direction. But
someone wants to see Oona in her 60s or 70s.
I do too, and that's
okay.
in my list. That's the reason that, you know, I'd revisit the story is because the first book is more about kind of experiencing older age through a younger kind of mentality. And I think that the next book definitely needs to, you know, now that she is actually kind of more mature, we need to see her more mature physically as well. And I want to explore the idea of kind of the second act and how, you know, people, but especially, you know, women are not kind of useless to society once they're in their 50s or 60s, and just the ways that, like, you know, older people still have so much value and so much to contribute. And in fiction too, you know, you don't see them a lot as protagonists. So that's something, you know, I'd want to kind of honor, I kind of honor different ages as I start to slowly get closer to them.
Well, since we can be a little spoilery here now that we're at near the end, I'm going to say that it wasn't until my second read through that I caught that she was a one-hit wonder in Europe.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
And I'm going to say I would love to read that chapter.
Okay, so we're doing a little spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, which I've already spoiled a little bit, but spoiler alert.
I will say that there, not only am I like in the back of my head obsessed with that whole kind of potential storyline, I've thought about and started writing like a whole kind of Oona adjacent book that that touches on that. And like, yeah, like it's part, I all of my books have little like Easter eggs that mention other books. And so like, there's always going to be like a little nod and wink and reference. And, you know, there's a character in Oona that's in my self-published book. And, you know, so, and there's a reference to Oona in the book that I'm writing now. So, yeah, like, I think in one way or another, I'm always kind of going to be touching little parts of the mythology, but specifically that sort of the 80s European adventures in new wave and music. Like there's definitely more like that I'm itching to get to at some point.
And it was such a great link to Kenzie that he owned that CD.
So have you thought about the music? Like who, if it's being adapted, we're going to hear her music too, aren't we?
I don't know. Oh, well, you know what? I don't know how much of the band, well, because right, she's in a band in the beginning. So
yeah, at least one song.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I never thought about what her band sounds like. I thought more about what she as a solo performer would sound like. And the kind of like, in my mind, I have kind of this musical like hodgepodge of people like, and some of it isn't even specifically like the music, but the attitude or the style, like the Deborah Harry or Nina Hagen or, you know, so there's definitely kind of this amalgam in my head, or, you know, and even like, it doesn't just have to be female artists too. Like, you know, I think also you know, there are male artists that she's influenced by, like Brian Ferry, David Bowie.
Is this the book? I read a lot of books, and so it's been a little while. Is this the book that you talk about? Do you mention garbage in this book? I can't remember.
I do mention garbage.
Yeah, I was like showing.
And because and this was
They were
me
from
in
Madison.
college as a
Yeah.
music snob. And Oona says the same thing that I say, and like Kenzie like totally gets like huffy about it, which people sometimes would with me too, except my friends who got it. I love this band Curve, who
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
I feel like just were very, very underrated and did what Garbage did before Garbage, and in my humble opinion, better than Garbage. So yeah, so mentioning them, and I actually, because I did go through a whole list of like who played in Boston around that time, around that year, and so when I got to Garbage, I was like, perfect, and I can do a shout out to Curve, awesome. And the only reason Curve isn't on Spotify, or if they're not on the Spotify playlist, their best albums for some reason they're not on Spotify, which is like, this is why we can't just rely on one streaming service for music. So yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about, let's see, where are we? Garbage is, somebody else likes Garbage, sorry.
I like
we
Garbage.
have, they were from, not Shirley Manson, who is Scottish, but the rest of the band was from Madison. So they're almost, local.
That's right.
Yeah, we've got a few bands of importance in Wisconsin. Would you like to? Should we talk another spoiler question? Should we talk about that ending? Did you know that was going to be the ending? When you started the book? Yeah, it's so great.
The endings to books are like titles. It's also where either I kind of know, I have an idea from the beginning, or I just torture myself and agonize and just, like to just find that just right way to end it. With this one, I knew like it has to have some kind of sense of full circle, but where it's like, I love that notion. One of my favorite quotes is, Oscar Wilde's, in this world, there are two tragedies. One is not getting what one wants, the other is getting it. And I feel like everything I write to some degree kind of either involves that notion of, like we all want something, and that like getting what we want is sometimes like the best and worst thing that can happen to us. So yeah, Oona's desperate to return to kind of where she started at this party, the people that she loves, the opportunities that, the place in her life, her youth. But once she's there, having lived through these other experiences, having seen glimpses of what her future is going to look like, and also, having come into her own and developed her own identity more and her agency more, how is this Oona gonna fit into the 1982, 1983 Oona, that world, and what people expect of her, and like the 19-year-old version of herself that, her boyfriend, her band, her mother are kind of expecting to encounter, because this is going to be a very different version. So that's something that for me also kind of like sets up some interesting areas to play in for the sequel of, so now you're back where you wanted to be, but so much more, you've seen so much more, and you're a different person. So how do you move forward?
How does she become young again after she's been older?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How much can you kind of compartmentalize your life?
Exactly.
Versus, like whether or not you like it, you get older and wiser, and you take on that wisdom, and you can't unknow things that you know. So it's more, how do you incorporate that into other moments of your life?
We don't have time to even talk about her relationship with her mom, but I did really love the way her mom, via plastic surgery, sort of mimics Oona, in that she's like sometimes younger, sometimes older, depending on what she's done to her body.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny. Do you have the last
we all
question?
loved her mom.
Yeah. We also read that you've said that you drew on your own mom a little bit.
Oh, my own relationship with my mother, it's one of the, greatest blessings of my life. She had me when she was 20, so it was a very Gilmore Girls-y relationship growing up, and we were very close, and despite ups and downs, I still talk to her regularly. I still consider her like my best friend. So it was very much kind of, Madeline is not a carbon copy, but her essence, her color, her wisdom, and just her liveliness was drawn a lot on the experiences I had growing up with my mom.
Jenny, you want to ask the last question?
No, I don't have a last question, but I just want to say that Madeline was an absolutely delightful character.
Thank you.
Sure.
We love your mom too.
Love
both fictional,
Madeline.
and if she's inspired by your real mom, we love her.
Absolutely. Yeah.
all.
I mean, just to give everybody a sense, when I was in college, my mom, my dad passed away, but when he was still alive, they came to visit me in this apartment that I had my senior year, and they went around the corner to a liquor store, got tons of alcohol and snacks, and they threw a party for all of my friends, and then they held court and talked about Russia, and when you could get expelled if you listened to the Beatles, and how they met buying blue jeans on the black market in somebody's dorm room in college. So how many parents would do that to just a bunch of 20-somethings that are just, and my friends, we were all wacky goth kids, so they were just not fazed. And so that was, I think their bohemian musical past still kind of, I think, lived on through them in that regard. So yeah, it's very, very, very lucky to have parents like that.
Wow. Well, we are, I was thinking about when you were talking about because Jenny and I both worked with a bookseller named Eugene Strapinsky, who was also came over from the Ukraine when he was, I think he came over when he was about 11.
Oh, okay. He has an accent.
He doesn't. Do you think he has an accent?
He doesn't anymore. No. And
Yeah.
I honestly don't really remember him as ever being a person.
I wish I could go back. Maybe when I wake up, I'll be with him again and I can check.
He picked up English very, very quickly.
Yeah.
He got here at 11. Yeah.
Sometimes I kind of wish, I know my husband, wishes I talked like a Bond villain. But,
Natasha, we are so grateful that you came tonight, and we are hoping that people will continue to love and Oona Out of Order, or if they want to read The Rearranged Life of Una Lockhart, you can read that too. I heard that's also good. And just will say about those two covers, it is very rare to see a pink jacket in the United States, and it's almost always done ironically, but they love those aqua jackets. That pretty much means comic novel.
mm-hmm.
I think because of the Maria Semple.
Mm-hmm.
The Bernadette.
Bernadette.
Yeah.
Where'd you go, Bernadette? Obviously, this is you can see
Absolutely.
resonance of Where You Go, Bernadette in that cover. In fact, I kept thinking the book was published by Little Brown, and they're like, no, it's Flatiron. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, when I had a Q&A, I got a questionnaire of what kind of cover ideas, and I was able to just here are covers I think are cool, here are colors I love and hate, and fonts I love and hate, but I could not think, I just don't have that visual type of brain especially for book covers, which are so kind of their own thing. So again, and I also find most book covers, it's very rare that a book cover really wows me. I'd say 1 in 50 books that I'm like, wow, ooh, this is awesome. Because again, they're more utilitarian. So to get not one, but two covers that have such an imagination and personality and style to them just really blew me away. So
Well, congratulations on that.
thank you. Thank you so much. This was a blast.
Yeah.
It was so fun to host you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anytime. And thank you everybody who is who's commented and asked questions. I hope I was able to answer everybody's questions, but you know,
I think we
if not,
hit just about all of them. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I think
you
we
know,
did.
but
And so many people saying what a wonderful book it was. So thought-provoking and great memories.
I've tried to read through all of the sidebar comments, and I really appreciate it. You can ask if there's anything else, come find me on social media. But otherwise, again, this was such a pleasure, and thank you both so much.
No, we wouldn't, and thanks to everyone who joined in, because we wouldn't have a virtual bookstore without you, and hope to see you in another event. Thank you very much to you and also to Jenny for a great evening. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody, good night.